Okay, so it's good to be back with Torah study after being away in Israel in December. So happy New Year, everybody, or happy secular New Year. I hope 2026 will be one of blessing and peace. The Torah portion this week is Shmot. We begin the second book of the Torah, the book of Exodus. So just interesting. Well, let me start with the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Um, and it's just interesting that the Hebrew word for the book is just like the portions are named for the first significant word in the sentence. So Shemot means names, but it has nothing to do with the content of the book itself. Like Breshit, well, okay, in the beginning. So yeah, that could be a good name for the book of, for the first book of the Torah. But Shemot, it's just interesting how in Hebrew the tradition is, how the tradition arose to name the book, whereas the English name, based on Latin or Greek, says more about what the content of the book is about, and that certainly is the focus on the Exodus from Egypt and beginning the journey to the land of Israel. Okay, that's just neither here nor there. But I wanted, if we have the time, there are three things that I wanted to talk about and look at with this week's portion. One is about the midwives. One is about Pharaoh's daughter, and one is about Moses himself. So we're not going to look at the entire portion, but we're introduced. Well, let's just dive right into the Hebrew, and we'll read the first several sentences of the parsha, getting to the midwives. So what is essentially the first aliyah, we'll read in Hebrew, and I'll translate. And then I wanted to point a couple of things out about this aliyah. Okay. Ve'ele shemot b'nei Yisrael habaim Mitzrayma et Yaakov ish uveto ba'u. So these are the names of the sons of Israel. Normally, B'nai Yisrael is the name of the people of Israel, and I did not translate it that way. I kept it literal because these are literally the sons of Israel, Jacob. So these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, a person and their home, they came. So in other words, it's understood there are going to be names, but it should be understood also that with these names come a whole family for each name. Okay, verse 2, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, and Yehuda. 3, Issachar, Zevulun, Uvinyamin. Dan v'Naftali, Gad v'Asher. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Vayehi kol nefesh yotzei Yerech Yaakov shivim nafesh v'Yosef haya b'Mitzrayim. And it was that all of the people who were generated by the loins of Jacob that's the literal translation, were 70 people, and Joseph was in Egypt. Okay, so that's why Joseph's name wasn't listed among the children of Israel, Jacob, because he was in Egypt already. And we know from last week's portion, the end of Genesis, all of the 70 names of people were given then of everyone who came into Egypt. 6, Vayamot Yosef v'chol echav v'chol hador hahu. Joseph and all his brothers and all of that generation died. Uvnei Yisrael paru v'yishritzu vayirbu v'ya'atzmu b'ma'od ma'od v'timalei ha'aretz otam. And now the people of Israel, the children of Israel, well, I guess they're not officially a people yet. That is in formation in this and next week's Parsha. So the children of Israel were fruitful, and they swarmed, and they multiplied, and they grew very great, and the land became filled with them. Now, it's interesting that Rashi says in his commentary about how they were fruitful and swarmed and multiplied and became great, that each pregnancy, 6 sextuplets were born. Okay, so it wasn't a single birth. It wasn't twins. It wasn't triplets, quadruplets, or 5. It was 6. Every pregnancy produced 6 children. So that's how they multiplied and grew greatly. Now, verse 8. Vayakom melech chadash al Mitzrayim, asher lo yada et Yosef. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. So perhaps this line is here to serve as the immediate transition to the end of the book of Genesis, so that we, if we're reading at one sitting, the book of Genesis ends with the death of Jacob and Joseph there burying his father. And now a reminder of how 70 people came to Egypt. And now a new king arose who did not know Joseph. So that could explain this reference to a new king arose who did not know Joseph. But what does that mean? But let's hold that thought for another couple of verses. Vayomer el amo, hine am b'nei Yisrael, rav ve'atzum mimenu. And he said to his people, that is the new king of Egypt, said to his people, hear the nation of the children of Israel. Okay, so I just said they're not a nation yet. It's in process. But the king of Egypt sees them as a nation. Okay, so it says the people, the Israelite people in English translation. Am is really nation. It can be people, but it's people who are formed like they are, that there's some kind of connection between all the people. Okay, so it's like 100,000 people could be attending a college football game, but you wouldn't call them a nation. They have something in common. They're rooting for one of the teams playing in the football game, but otherwise you wouldn't say that those 100,000 people are connected in any other way. So that's what I'm saying. You wouldn't call that group of fans, those 100,000 people, a nation. You would just say the people in attendance or something like that, or the fan, or they say sometimes the fans of a team are called like Commander's Nation or Eagles Nation, right? That the whole group of fans around the world who root for that particular team is called that team's nation. That's a stretch, but it gets to the thing that binds that particular group of people together, and that is commitment to that particular team. All right, so that's a stretch in terms of defining nation. Here, nation is more, people are bound together by similar value, morals, ethics, and values that distinguish that people from other people. That would make that group then to be called a nation. So I'm suggesting that the king of Egypt is referring to what hasn't been referred to yet as the children of Israel as a nation. And something about them has prompted the king of Egypt to call them a nation, whereas the Torah whereas the people of Israel themselves aren't describing themselves as a people or a nation yet. Okay, so it's just interesting to see that, right? So we're called Hebrews in the book of Genesis, and that's mainly other people referring to us as Hebrews. So here, other people are referring to us as a nation where we, the children of Israel, haven't even thought to describe themselves that way. So the king of Egypt says to his people, or to his nation, here the people of the children of Israel are mighty and great, are mightier and greater than us. Is that true? I can't imagine that even in one generation, 70 could become, I don't know, 140, 200 people or more. Let's say 500 people. 70 becomes 500 in the next generation. How is 500 people more than the people of Egypt? So clearly it's an exaggeration. 10, Hava nit chakmalo pen yirbeh, v'haya ki tikrena milchama, v'nosaf gamhu al sonenu, v'nilcham banu, v'ala min haaretz. Let us deal shrewdly, or let us outsmart them. That's how I would translate it. Let us outsmart them, or him, that is, him being the singular nation of Israel, lest they grow greater. And if there's a war to be waged against us, they will be added to our enemies, and they will fight against us, and they'll rise up from the earth. Okay, so let's stop there for a moment and look at below the line on page 317, because it gets to what is this king of Egypt worried about, and why does the king of Egypt have it in for the people of Israel? The only thing that we see that could be wrong in Pharaoh's eyes is that they've grown populous. But what else about them could prompt the king of Egypt to have this worry or hatred of the people of Israel? What could have prompted that? So if we look below the line where on 317, where it says chapter 1, the historian asks, and I'm sorry that I didn't say what page we were on before. I just assumed we knew what page it was in Eitz Chaim for the start of the book of Exodus. I'm sorry. So the historian asks, what political, economic, or religious factors inclined Pharaoh to enslave the Israelites? Okay, so depending on how we look at the book, if we're looking at the book from a historical perspective, we're wondering, like I just asked, what was it about the Israelites that prompted Pharaoh to do this? But the Midrash, so the Jewish perspective, that is the rabbis of 1500 to 2000 years ago, ask, why is Israel persecuted and enslaved more than any other nation of the world? Okay, so I think that's fascinating. This from Nechama Leibowitz, a renowned teacher of Torah in Israel, to see this. If we are a neutral observer, neither Egyptian or Jew, then we're reading that we would be interested in the question, why does Pharaoh have it in for the Israelites? But if we're reading it from a Jewish perspective, which of course we are, we're wondering, why does he have it in for us? Right? We're reading it from our perspective. What did we do wrong to prompt Pharaoh to enslave us? Which begs the historical Jewish question, what do we have to do to avoid being persecuted and oppressed by other people, right? And it's a question we ask today in 2026 with the rise of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. What did we do wrong, or no? What did we do? Let's say right or wrong. What did we do to prompt this hatred, right? And it's a question. There's this play that came out that was on Broadway last year, Leopoldstadt, about a Jewish family in Vienna in the 1900s, leading up to the Holocaust. It's a question that Jews ask in every generation. Most Jews just want to live under the radar, be able to go to shul, be able to lead a life, be able to worship God in a Jewish way without being bothered by anybody else, and even want to contribute to society. What is it about us that prompts this kind of reaction that says, from the host nation, we're a bad people? So there's no answer given, except the Torah describes it that we've become great in number. So there isn't a value judgment about that, except the only value judgment about the description of how populous we've become is that it says in verse 7, Paru v'yishritzu. So the root there, shin resh tzadi, sheretz, is a creepy crawly thing. So that could imply a negative description of how we are becoming fruitful and multiplying. We're swarming over the earth. And it's not a positive description, but it's just about numbers. But it could be understood, you picture a swarming mass of cockroaches or something over the floor. You're reviled by that. You want to run away from it. You certainly, if you try to kill it, it's really hard to do because they're just swarming in endless numbers. So that's the only hint that there's something negative here about the people of Israel or about the children of Israel. So otherwise, there's nothing else that says anything about what could have prompted the king of Egypt to have this negative reaction, and what will be in a couple of verses, the command to the midwives to kill the all male children born on their birth stools. Okay, so I want to go on with the commentary here. The sages of the Midrash writing more than 1,000 years after the events and living under the harsh rule of the Romans. Just want to stop there. So rabbis living under Roman rule, experiencing persecution and oppression, experiencing hatred, experiencing the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by those very Romans, okay, where then the rabbis in that generation are asking the same question that Jews ask in every generation: what did we do wrong? So now I go on, try to interpret the experience of slavery in Egypt as a way of understanding their own experience. Some said that slavery was a punishment for assimilating into the Egyptian way of life and wanting to be like the Egyptians. Okay, so some people like to prefer to understand our lot in life religiously or spiritually. We must have done something wrong. That is, we must have sinned. We must have violated some Jewish precept to cause this punishment. So perhaps the rabbis are suggesting that the Israelites assimilated into Egyptian culture, forgetting about their history, their tribal association with God, etc. Assimilation is bad, and that the rabbis are suggesting is reason for the punishment. Whatever Jews are experiencing in any generation, and here what the Torah is describing, slavery in Egypt because of assimilation. They interpreted the words, "the land was filled with them," to mean the theaters and circuses were filled with them. That is, how was the earth filled with them? Well, they went to all these Egyptian cultural events. Again, the rabbis are reading back into history. And so if in Roman times there were amphitheaters and coliseums, there must have been that in Egypt also. And you're by attending those events, you are not only assimilated, but you are condoning Egyptian culture and even idolatry. Okay. The Israelites adopted the Egyptian way of life in all of its crudeness and superficiality. Thus, psychological enslavement, the notion that being an Egyptian was better than being an Israelite, preceded physical enslavement, even as psychological liberation will later precede physical liberation, right? So first, you psychologically feel part of Egyptian culture, and that leads then to being bound physically as a slave to Egypt. These commentators describe the Israelites as devoid of redeeming qualities and see the Exodus as resulting from God's unearned grace and God's promise to the patriarchs. So Israelites didn't do anything to deserve being freed from Egypt. It's just God fulfilling God's promise. Okay, that's one way that the rabbis in the Midrash understood this seemingly unwarranted hatred and enslavement of the Jews. Others, the commentary goes on, saw enslavement in Egypt as part of God's long-range plan, foreshadowed in Genesis 15, to take the descendants of Abraham and teach them through the experience of being enslaved and redeemed to be sensitive to the oppressed in every age. You shall not wrong a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt, and to be grateful to God for intervening to free them. Okay, so enslavement serves a religious purpose for us to learn how to treat the poor and disadvantaged and oppressed in society. On the opening words of the book, these are the names. The sages commented that the Israelites were worthy of being redeemed precisely because they did not assimilate. Through all the years of slavery, they did not change their names, their language, or their mode of dress. So it's reading the very same words. These rabbis are suggesting that the book of Exodus, starting with the names, which are Hebrew names, highlighting the idea that in Egypt they continued to give their children Hebrew names, and they did not assimilate. So some rabbis, based on the words here, suggest that they did assimilate. Other rabbis suggest that they did not assimilate. Still did not answer the question, the age-old question, what about us as Israelites, Jews, could cause this level of anti-Semitism? Okay, I want to, because time is fleeting, I want to go to look at chapter 2 and to look at Moses and to understand from what is presented here what the Torah thinks is the reason why Moses is chosen to be the leader, the redeemer of the people of Israel. So let's just start with chapter 2. Let's start with the third aliyah on page 323. Okay, Moses is born in chapter 2. They avoid the birth, the midwives. He's put in a basket, floats down the river. His sister Miriam is following surreptitiously in the bulrushes. Pharaoh's daughter finds the basket and adopts Moses and hires Miriam's mother to be the nursemaid. Okay, so that's where we are. Verse 11. Okay, so the bottom of 323. Vayahi bayamim hahem vayigdal Moshe vayetze el echav vayar besivlotam vayar ish mitzri makeh ish ivri me'echav. So, after some time, Moses grew up, so we don't know how old he is. Moses grew up, and he went out to his brothers. Now, how did he know that these were his brothers, that these were his people? So it assumes that Pharaoh's daughter did not make Moses into an Egyptian. She didn't convert him in some formal way to Egyptianism, if that's a word. Somehow she maintained his Israelite identity so that he knew, right? So that's what we have to assume from this sentence, that he knew who his brothers were. Okay, so there's lots of midrashim about that, or you can also see the movies, the Ten Commandments from the late 50s, and the Prince of Egypt, the cartoon movie, to try to understand how Moses grew up and how Moses understood that he was not an Egyptian, but he was something else. Okay, but that's all midrash. The Torah does not explain that to us. So I just want to highlight that as we're reading this, we should be careful what we're reading. That how did he know, and how much time passed? How old is he here? How does he know that they are his brothers? And he sees their suffering, and he saw an Egyptian man hitting, slaying, smiting a Hebrew man from among his brothers. Okay, so that's what he sees. Or this is the story that the Torah is choosing to share with us among many stories of Moses' life. But this is the only story that remains. 12, Vayifen ko vacho, vayar ki ein ish, vayach et hamitzri, vayitmenehu bachol. And he, that is Moses, turned this way and that, like he's looking around, making sure there's no surveillance cameras around. And he sees that there's nobody watching, and he slays the Egyptian, and he buries him in the sand, or hides him in the sand. 13, so that's incident number 1. This first thing we see about Moses, right? The first thing we see is things done to him. He's born, he is put in a basket, and Pharaoh's daughter takes him in. Okay, those are things done to him. The first thing he does when he's grown up, and we have no idea how old he is that he slays an Egyptian because the Egyptian is attempting to kill a fellow Hebrew. 13, Vayetze bayom hasheni vehine shnei anashim ivrim nitzim vayomer la rasha lama takereyecha. So when he went out on the second day, now it's understood here in the English, the next day. So when he went out the second day, so the second day doesn't necessarily mean the next day. It could mean another day. And it's sometime after this day which he killed the Egyptian. There were 2 Hebrew men fighting. And he said to the evil one, "Why are you hitting your fellow person?" So clearly Moses sees, by the way they're fighting, that one is the instigator and one's the victim. So 14, Vayomer mi samacha leish sar v'shofet aleinu hala hargeni ata omer ka'asher haragta et hamitzri vayira Moshe vayomar achein noda hadavar. So he said, that is the evil one, the instigator, who made you a person who is a minister and a judge over us? Or as it says here, chief and ruler over us, right? Which foreshadows the fact that Moses is going to be made chief and ruler over the people of Israel. God's going to make him that, right? So this evil person is questioning how Moses should be the one to take charge, when we know in the book coming up that God's going to make him in charge. So it's just interesting foreshadowing here in the use of language here. Are you planning to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? So then somehow the word had gotten out that he had killed the Egyptian, and now Moses knows, Moses understands and says, the thing is known. And then so known that in verse 15, Vayishma Paro et hadavar hazeh, Vayevakesh laharog et Moshe, Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paro, Vayeshev be'eretz Midyan, Vayeshev al habe'er. So Pharaoh heard this matter, and he sought to kill Moses. So Moses fled from before Pharaoh, and he settled in the land of Midian, which is somewhere in the Sinai Peninsula, and he settled by a well. Now, I just want to point out, which the bottom, the below the line points out, is that of all incidents in Moses' life that the Torah could have chosen to share, like, let me just say this. We have no idea if Moses really existed as a person. There is no historical evidence that Moses existed. Obviously, there's historical evidence of pharaohs, but in all the stories of the pharaohs, all written material about all the pharaohs that could have been around this time, there is no story of a Moses. That doesn't mean that Moses didn't exist. I'm just saying that there is no historical evidence to prove that Moses exists, as opposed to King David, where there is evidence, and other kings of Israel, where there is evidence. There is no evidence of Moses. So, assuming that Moses existed, and then you want to, that is, the editors of the Torah want to teach us a lesson about Moses himself. Why do they choose a story like this that is violent as opposed to something gentle to choose from? So let's keep that question in mind, and look at, on the next page, on chapter 3, a different kind of story. So this story is a violent story showing something about Moses' character, which for the instigator of the fighting, in his mind, Moses is already a sar and a shofet, a chief and a ruler. So if we look at the start of chapter 3 on page 326, Umoshe haya ro'eh et son yitro chotno kohen Midyan vayinhag et hatson achar hamidbar vayavo el har ha'elohim choreva. So Moses was shepherding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, right? That's what we missed in the verses in between. He settles by the well. He meets these 7 women who are the daughters of Jethro, and he saves them from harassment by other shepherds and allows them to be able to get water for their flocks. And so the women bring him back home, and he marries the oldest one of those daughters, Tzipporah. Okay, so Moses was shepherding the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, who was the priest of Midian, and he led the flock into the wilderness, and he came to a mountain, to the mountain of God, to Chorev. Okay, so it assumes we know what Chorev is, which is another name for Mount Sinai. So the Torah assumes we know this already. It doesn't need to tell us a story about how it became the mountain of God. Like what happened there before the Torah was given and the 10 Commandments were given at Mount Sinai, which we'll see in chapter 20. Right? So that's how we know it becomes the mountain of God. But it was the mountain of God, it says here, even before that. So something spiritual, awesome, happened on that mountain before, but the Torah isn't telling us what it is. So Moses is shepherding the flock at Chorev. Vayera malach Adonai elav, belabat esh, mitoch hasneh. Vayar v'hinei hasneh bo'er ba'esh, v'hasneh einenu ukal. So an angel of the Lord, an angel of God, appeared to him in a fire, a flame of fire, or a blazing fire, out of the bush. It says in English, out of a bush, but it's out of the bush. So I'm careful about that because, again, just as the Torah assumes we know about the mountain of God, it also assumes we know about this bush. So an angel of God appears to Moses out of a flame in this bush, and he looked and he saw that the bush was on fire, but the bush was not being consumed by the fire. So imagine setting fire to a bush, and you would imagine that quickly the bush would be consumed by the flame, and the flame would burn itself out because there's no more fuel there. But here, the bush continues to stay alive, and the flame continues to burn. So the question is, we don't have to read the rest of the story. The question is, now, you have one story of Moses, recognizing his violent nature, but violent for the sake of saving someone from violence. So he's using physical force in order to save someone else from physical force. So he allows himself to, like, he's not a peace lover. So, in other words, if we only had the story in chapter 2, we'd understand that Moses has a temper that he allows to get the better of himself, but controlled in a way that it's used to save someone who is being attacked. Okay, so that's what we learn about Moses from chapter 2. What we learn about Moses in chapter 3, he's a shepherd, and he's taking care of the flock. The stories could exist independent of each other, and if they did, they would be two totally opposite kind of characters. A quiet shepherd tending his flock, seeing this mystical vision of this bush being consumed by a flame and seeing an angel of God there. And this other story so that's mystical, spiritual. And the other is a very concrete physical story of someone using brute force to seek justice. So if yes. Right. Okay. If we look, I was just looking below the line of where I wanted to start from. Let's look at the bottom of 326, the very last line on the right that goes then onto page 327. Drove the flock into the wilderness. Why into the wilderness? Rashi suggests that this was necessary to prevent the flocks from grazing on someone else's land, for that would be theft. Sforno, who lived in Italy in the 1400s, says that it was to be free of distraction so that Moses could meditate. The Midrash tells a story of a lamb running away and Moses chasing it into the wilderness. God, taking notice, decides that this is a man of compassion, fit to be the leader of the people. The first impression emphasizes Moses' commitment to justice and ethical behavior. The second sees him as a mystic, a man in search of God's presence. The third describes his compassion. Okay, so all of these ideas we can get from this story itself. But we also have to keep this story with the other one about Moses' physical attributes as well. So I think that what the Torah is trying to tell us with these two stories is briefly share with us that Moses is a complicated character. A lot of people are physical people, deal with what in reality with what's in front of them, and they are not mystical people. Some people can be mystical people and have a hard time dealing with the reality, like that, like people who are more saintly, bookish, being able to see mystical things, have a hard time dealing with the reality of the world around them. So these two stories, I think, together tell us that Moses is a unique individual, that he can deal with the physical and he can also deal with the mystical at the same time. And it's the rare individual that can do both. We'd be hard pressed to find other people in history who, over the generations, that have both qualities about them. Okay, we have military leaders who are heroic for their actions in saving people and saving a nation, and we have mystical people in religious tradition who also save a nation through their connection with God. But it's rare that you have a person that embodies both aspects. And so I think that that's what the Torah with these two very anecdotal kind of stories. They're teaching us these great things about Moses himself. Okay, that's what I wanted to share about the portion this week. I hope everybody has a good rest of the week, and see you next Wednesday for another Torah study. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Take care.